Christian Eckes will officially join Kaulig Racing in 2025, and Harrison-Burton's future in NASCAR is a little uncertain. What's going on, guys? It's Daniel, and welcome back to our video. We got some NASCAR and other motorsports story discusser today on the channel. Let's go ahead and just show them very quickly. We're about to start talking about Carson Hocevar, as it was reported by Joseph Strigley that Carson Hocevar is the youngest driver to start on the front row at Darlington Raceway at the young age of 21 years, 7 months, and 4 days. Carson Hocevar has been very impressive this year with Spire Motorsports, especially at a very young age, and he continues to do a lot of incredible things over at Spire Motorsports. It's a shame he unfortunately crashed out during the Southern 500, but it's pretty crazy to think that he is officially now the youngest driver ever saw in the front row. He's got a lot of talent, and he does have a lot of potential. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Kyle Larson. As Kyle Larson became officially the first driver to lead 1,000 laps in the NASCAR Cup Series in 2024. Kyle Larson put up a dominating clinic. He had to lead 175 laps coming into the Southern 500 to reach 1,000. He led 263 laps, which is more than all the other Hendrick Motorsports cars have led all year so far. Kyle Larson has done impressive things. Unfortunately, did not win the Southern 500, but he continues to do a lot of impressive things throughout the season, and I think that he has a really good chance to win the championship. He is also getting very close to leading 9,000 laps in Cup competition, and is also getting closer and closer to leading 15,000 laps across the top 3 divisions. He put up a dominating clinic. Congratulations on a very impressive and great run. Really great stuff from Kyle Larson. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about CAA Sports. As it was reported by Adam Stern on Friday, that NASCAR has listed CAA Sports to help it find a new chief commercial officer per sources as it looks to keep pace in sponsorship sales with Liberty Media. According to Adam Stern as well, it sounds like the person they're looking to get is from New York City. We all know that Formula One is trying to pick up a lot of sponsorship going forward, and they're trying to beat NASCAR in that area. While NASCAR has the popularity for people watching, you're still seeing F1 continue to grow, especially in the U.S. There's talk about F1 going to Chicago currently at the moment. And for NASCAR to continue to keep up, that's what they need to do if they're going to have a chance and opportunity to really stay in the game. And I really hope they can continue to do this going forward so that they don't get beat by basically Formula One and Liberty Media. If they can find a new commercial officer to help out, I think it'll give them the chance and opportunity to stay ahead and stay in the game, in my honest opinion. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Brexton Busch and Keelan Harvick. As over the weekend before you had the NASCAR Cup race at Darlington for the Southern 500, you also had a lot of racing at Florence Speedway, some Legends car racing, some Bandoleros racing, and also had the Car Store race at Florence as well. We saw Ryan Middleton go out and win the Car Store race, but also both Brexton Busch and Keelan Harvick were both able to win at Florence Speedway. Brexton Busch won in the Bandoleros, and Keelan Harvick, of course, won in Legends cars. Both have a lot of potential, both have a lot of talent in my opinion, and both could be two of the most successful drivers. You think about Keelan is, I believe, only 12 years old currently at the moment. He is not that far away from racing in NASCAR. We're only about 4 or 5 years where he could race in the Truck Series in the future, and Brexton's about 7 or 8 years away from being able to race in NASCAR as well. Congratulations to both drivers on being able to go out to win. Very impressive and well-deserved wins for them, in my honest opinion. And by the way, Keelan did beat Bubba Wallace. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Louis Foster. As with Louis Foster picking up the victory at the Milwaukee Mile, he has won the 2024 Indy NXT Championship. Congratulations to Louis Foster. It has been a dominant season in the NXT for him so far this year. I think he's won 7 or 8 races this year. And there's been talk and conversations about maybe him in the future moving up to the IndyCar Series maybe. There's been talk about him moving up, Jamie Chadwick moving up. I think Louis is a very talented driver, a dominant season. He basically, if he won the race, he was going to win the championship, and he was just able to do that, putting up an impressive and insanely dominant clinic. And for him to win the IndyCar Championship, NXT Championship, only his first or second year, is very impressive. So congratulations to him on winning the Indy NXT Championship for 2024. Well earned and well deserved, in my opinion. And now we're going ahead, jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Tyler Reddick. As with Tyler Reddick only beating Kyle Larson by 1 point, he has won the 2024 NASCAR Cup Series regular season championship. Massive congratulations to Tyler Reddick. Tyler Reddick was so consistent through the rest of the regular season. He was almost 100 points back of Kyle Larson right before the Coca-Cola 600. But they stuck their head down, and they've only had 2 finishes outside of the top 20 pretty much in the last 15 to 16 weeks. It's been so insane to watch consistency. And he didn't really have the greatest Southern 500. Kyle Larson had the best car most of the night. I already talked about the fact that he led 263 laps. But he kept his head down, he didn't give up, and was able to get it done. He was not feeling well throughout the evening, but still to see Tyler Reddick go out there and you see what 23XI has accomplished in a short period of time. I remember when this team formed just about 4 years ago. They formed on September 21st of 2020. And 4 years later, they're winning the regular season championship with Michael Jordan being in attendance, which is pretty impressive to watch. Nonetheless, congratulations, Tyler Reddick, on winning the regular season championship. He earned it, in my opinion, and this could be really huge going into the playoffs starting this weekend at Atlanta Motor Speedway. And now we're going ahead, jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about the Italian Grand Prix. Before you had the IndyCar races, or the second IndyCar race in Milwaukee, and the NASCAR Cup Series race for the Southern 500, you had the Italian Grand Prix. Now, early in the race, McLaren dominated. Oscar Piastri pretty much dominated the whole entire race after getting by Lando Norris basically through the first few corners of the racetrack. Lando tried to get back by, but unfortunately couldn't get back by as he lost a ton of momentum, and Charles Leclerc moved up to second. Now these guys, Oscar Piastri and Lando Norris, they did a 2-stop strategy, while, of course, Charles Leclerc decided to play a 1-stop strategy. And eventually the tires kind of started equaling out at the end of the race. Oscar was running him down so quickly, he was about 3.5 seconds back coming to the end of the race, but it would not be enough, and coming off the final corner, Charles Leclerc picks up his second win of the 2024 Formula One season and his 7th career Formula One win. Leclerc did everything right. He put himself in the right position to get it done, and he earned the win, in my opinion. They played a great strategy. Basically, one win. Basically, they got it done by doing 1 stop. And like I said, Oscar Piastri was running him down, but he ran out of time and ran out of chances to get there. Still a very impressive day for the Ferrari organization. Obviously, we know Carlos Sainz ain't going back to Ferrari with Lewis Hamilton coming in. We know he's going to Williams next year. So I think that it's a big win for them. Congratulations to Charles Leclerc and Ferrari on picking up the win in Formula One. Well deserved, in my honest opinion. And now we're going ahead, jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Brad Keselowski. As it was reported by Bob Pockrass for the Southern 500 that Brad Keselowski had sold Keselowski Automotive Manufacturing to the admin company. This is a story that was announced earlier this week that was not able to cover on the channel, but obviously Brad Keselowski said he wanted to sell the company off so that he could have a little bit more money coming into the organization and team going forward. And he also said it did make a lot of sense for the future of the Keselowski Automotive Manufacturing. I think it's disappointing to see Brad sell this company. I've seen some of the big groups that have come over to work with Brad Keselowski on this project, but at the same token, in the same time, I completely understand why he decided to do it. It makes a ton of sense to make the move when you're trying to make as much money as possible. So I can't blame Brad for doing that. He wanted to bring as much money as he could in, and again, I can't blame him for that. So while I'm disappointed to see that the company is going away going forward, it's not majorly shocking or majorly surprising, to be honest, to see Keselowski Automotive Manufacturing going away. I think he'll be able to use that money to build up RFK. There's rumors, of course, of RFK Racing expanding to a 3-car operation in the Cup Series in 2025, so that any money that he can get for selling stuff off, the better it is going to be for Brad. So overall, I'm not entirely shocked, and I'm not surprised to see this happening. Am I disappointed? Yes, a little bit, but at the same token, same time, I'm not too shocked and surprised to see this, to be honest with you. And now we're going ahead, jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Darlington Throwback Week. As it was confirmed once again yesterday that the Darlington Throwback Weekend will once again take place in 2025. And unlike being at the Southern 500 once again next year, it will once again return from April 5th to 6th weekend, meaning that the Truck Series, the Xfinity Series, and the Cup Series will all have Throwback Weekend once again in 2025. This means that a lot of teams are going to already have to start working on throwbacks because April is only about 7 months away from now. So they're already probably going to be starting to plan what throwbacks are going to be running in 2025. If you wanted my honest opinion, I feel like Throwback Weekend should have probably taken place at North Wilkesboro maybe, but then again, you don't have Xfinity, so I get why there. Maybe Xfinity could have had their Throwback Weekend at Rocky, and maybe just the Cup Series could have had their Throwback Weekend at Darlington or run it at the Southern 500, because in my opinion, when it comes to throwback schemes, you already see a lot of these throwback schemes run again at Southern 500. We saw Ross Chastain run that retro paint scheme. And then, of course, we saw the other paint schemes from like Brennan Poole this weekend and all the other retro schemes. I feel like Throwback Weekend should be taking place during Southern 500 weekend, but I'm not the one who makes the decisions. NASCAR is the one that does make the decisions. So am I surprised to see they're doing it again like this? No, I'm not too shocked, but at the same token, at the same time, I feel like they could have done it once again a little bit later in the year instead of having it earlier in the year, in my honest opinion. And now we're going ahead to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Kevin Magnussen. As it was officially confirmed after the Formula One race that Kevin Magnussen will not be racing in the Azerbaijan Grand Prix in the streets of Baku as he has been suspended at the Azerbaijan Grand Prix. Now, how could Kevin Madison get suspended? Well, they have a penalty point system in Formula One. And if you go over 10 penalty points throughout the whole entire season, they can have the opportunity and chance to go ahead and suspend you. That's why Kevin Madison, unfortunately, was suspended. I know he was questioning the move, but again, he basically made a big mistake. He got a penalty. I don't think he served that penalty, if I remember correctly, during the race. Had he served the penalty throughout the event, Kevin Madison is probably racing this week in Azerbaijan. Now, the big question is going to be who is going to be his replacement for this upcoming race at Baku. My best guess is his replacement is likely going to be Ollie Behrman. We know he's going full-time in Formula One in 2025, and he already did make his F1 debut in the streets of Jeddah, so I would have to imagine that he's going to replace Kevin Magnussen for this week. It's a really disappointing situation for Kevin, but at the same token, same time, you got to know better not to race people like idiots on the racetrack. He was racing way over aggressive and way too much, in my opinion. And overall, I think that basically it's basically the right call, unfortunately. As much as it pains me to say that for him, it was the right call to go ahead and penalize him because you can't race like an idiot. I think they did make the right decision and the right call when it comes to Kevin Magnussen, in my honest opinion, because he's had a little bit of over-aggressive driving. We already know, of course, he won't be coming back to Formula One in 2025. We do think he could be going over to sports car racing next season. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about IndyCar at Milwaukee. Right before the NASCAR event started taking place at Darlington Raceway, you had the IndyCar doubleheader at Milwaukee. There were two races, which would be two of the last three races for the championship. In race number one, there, of course, was quite a bit of chaos. You had a crash between Marcus Ericsson and Joseph Newgarden throughout the event, and then you had some pretty crazy racing. Scott McLaughlin dominated the race early, but unfortunately faded back a little bit. Linus Lundqvist led a ton of laps, but eventually Padle Ward emerged and pretty much had the dominant car. He got a really great restart in race number one, and he would come off the corner in race number one and pick up the win, as there was some pretty good racing throughout the field and the pack, and he had some pretty big chaos as well, like Kyle Kirkwood almost getting wrecked. Race 2 was absolutely nutty. Alex Palou unfortunately got stalled at the beginning. I don't know what it was. They weren't entirely sure exactly what it was, basically. And then, of course, they had a lot more chaos on the start. So Linus Lundqvist get in the back of Marcus Armstrong and then get into Joseph Newgarden. You had Joseph Newgarden going after Georgia Henneberry and not being happy with her about the question that she asked him. And then he just had more craziness. Will Power crashes halfway through the event. He had a lot of chaos near the end. It set up for a great restart. He had great racing throughout the field in the pack. And Scott McLaughlin would hold off a hard-charging Scott Dixon to pick up his second win, I believe, of 2024 and keep him slightly in the championship hunt. And despite the fact Alex Palou fell out early, he came back in the race and finished in 19th position. While it's a disappointing finish for Palou, at least he has a decent run because Will Power did not finish well. I think he finished 10th or 11th. So basically now we do have a championship fight going to Nashville, but I think at this point, realistically, Palou's probably still going to win the championship because Will Power has to win and hope Alex Palou crashes out, which is probably not going to happen. So congratulations, nonetheless, both Padle Ward and Scott McLaughlin on going to victory lane and winning both races. Congratulations to both of them on getting it done this weekend in Milwaukee, and we'll go to Nashville on September 15th and decide a champion. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Kimi Antonelli. As it was officially confirmed on early Saturday morning that Kimi Antonelli will officially join Mercedes in Formula One in 2025. This has been expected for a very long time that Kimi Antonelli will be moving up full-time to the, not NASCAR, to Formula One with Mercedes. As we know, Lewis Hamilton will be departing Mercedes at the end of this year to go to Ferrari starting in 2025. Kimi Antonelli is a very talented race car driver, in my opinion, just turned 18 years old. And despite the fact he basically only ran 2 laps in FP1, he still had a very impressive lap number 1, but unfortunately ended up crashing out on lap number 2. Kimi Antonelli, a lot of people feel like could be the next big thing. He could be the next Max Verstappen, but only time will tell. I think Kimi is going to have a solid year next year in 2025. I think he'll run pretty solidly. I do think he could win in his rookie year. I think the last driver to win really in the rookie year was Max Verstappen, and Max kind of did run a lot of the year in 2015. So technically Max was a rookie in 2016, and Max was, like I said, the last one to get it done as a rookie. I think Kimi Antonelli is going to have a very strong season next year. I think he will have a great year. Mercedes been showing a lot of pace. You've seen the McLarens be quick, and the McLarens do get their engines, of course, from the Mercedes. So I do think that next year, especially with the upgrades coming for the team, we could see him try to take it and win as a rookie and Formula One champion. So we'll see what ends up doing next year. He's going to have a lot of pressure going into the 2025 season as a rookie, but I think he'll have a really good chance and a strong opportunity to be competitive in his first time around and as a full-time driver in the series. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about the NASCAR Awards ceremony. As it was officially confirmed on early Friday morning that the NASCAR Awards ceremony is officially moving to Charlotte in 2024 and will take place on November 22nd. The NASCAR Awards ceremony has been in a lot of different areas over the last few years. From 1981 to 2015, I believe, or 2001 or something like that, it took place in New York City. Then from about 2010 to 2016 or 2017, it took place in Las Vegas. And then starting in 2017 or 2018, it moved to downtown Nashville. There was talk it will still going to remain in Nashville for 2025 or 24, but obviously that has changed, and it'll be moving to Charlotte for the rest of the year. I'm really not surprised about it that they're moving it to Charlotte. It makes a lot more sense to have it in the Queen City of Charlotte. I think having it in that area makes a lot more sense to happen considering the fact that it will make the teams happy. But at the same time, I kind of understand why people from areas like Nashville are upset. It kind of, people probably from Nashville think at this point, yeah, they're not really listening to us anymore and they don't want to race here in the future for a championship. Because they're having talk about Nashville maybe getting the season finale and maybe then having the awards ceremony in Nashville make a lot of sense. But at the same time, it's going to help save the teams a lot of money to happen to travel out there, and they'll be able to use that money to invest in upgrading their program. So I think it makes a lot of sense personally, as much as it's disappointing. Every other one will happen, I believe, on the 21st or 20th, and it will be on the CW, I believe, on November 24th. But it will be tape delayed by 2 days, as obviously the awards ceremony will be live. I think Sirius XM will be covering it live, while, of course, the awards ceremony will be on TV a couple days later. I'm not really shocked and surprised about this, all things considered, and as much as it's disappointing for sure, again, it doesn't shock or does not surprise me to see that they're moving it around going into this year as they're trying to save the teams and help them a little bit, in my honest opinion. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Bubba Wallace. Now, Bubba Wallace, unfortunately, was among many drivers who did not make the playoffs for 2024, including Chris Buescher, including Kyle Busch, who almost won the race, and Ross Chastain also ended up missing the playoffs for 2024. All drivers who I thought going into this year were likely going to make the playoffs. Now, Bubba Wallace, after the race, was really frustrated, but he also was more frustrated at himself than anybody else because he said that my teammate was able to win the regular season championship and I couldn't make the playoffs. He said it's not acceptable. Now look, Bubba Wallace should have probably made the playoffs this year. They had a lot of bad luck throughout the year. You think about New Hampshire. He got crashed out by Austin Dillon and Noah Gragson making a bad bonsai move. Michigan had by far the fastest car in the race and was easy going to win that race before all the chaos started happening for him and got caught up in the Kyle Larson mistake. The week after Kyle Larson proclaimed to be the best driver in the world, and I still think he probably is the best driver in the world, by the way, even though SVG is competing. And I just feel bad for Bubba Wallace that he did everything he had to do at Darlington. He led a ton of laps in the race and was easy going to go out there and get the victory potentially, or at least get a top 5, top 10. Unfortunately, Chase Briscoe winning the Southern 500 really threw eggs in the basket. It cost him a shot at it, unfortunately, and I don't think that he did anything wrong being Chase Briscoe. It's not like Chase Briscoe was 30 from the points like Harrison Burton. Chase Briscoe was 18th in the standings and legit had a solid year, all things considered. As much as I am disappointed for him in this situation, and it does suck to see that he isn't going to be basically running into playoffs. They've had a lot of speed. I'm proud of Bubba. He's had a really good year so far in 2024. Again, it's a shame to see that he will not be racing for a championship this year, but at the same time, even though he didn't get it done, he should be proud of everything he was able to accomplish this year, and I think there's a lot of positives to take away. And now the big focus for Bubba is try to end the year off really well and go on a high note, and as he likely, of course, will be back with 2311 next year, and use that confidence and momentum and try to focus on winning a championship next year in the NASCAR Cup Series and trying to be up there with his teammate for 2025. Hopefully he can do that and prove me right and run very, very well with 2311 Racing in 2025 as well. I'm disappointed for Bubba, but he did a very good job this year in 2024. And now we're going to head jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Padle Ward. Now, we do have a couple Padle Ward stories we're going to talk about on the channel. But obviously, you've been following the IndyCar paddock, or basically the IndyCar world, over the course of the last few months, or last weekend or so. You saw that Padle Ward and Mark Miles had words over the internet, basically. Well, basically speaking to the media. Padle Ward basically called out IndyCar over the weekend for not racing in Mexico City, and he said that they should not have been able to be beat by NASCAR, because we know NASCAR, of course, is going to Mexico City in 2025. Well, Mark Miles pretty much responded to Padle Ward by basically saying on Friday that Padle Ward is not as popular as Adrian Fernandez. He says he's getting up there, but he's not as popular as Adrian was in IndyCar. When I saw those comments from Mark Miles, I was really, really frustrated. Look, Mark Miles, there are some things you just don't say. Of course, Adrian Fernandez was more popular in the 1990s when IndyCar was more popular then than it is now. Padle Ward is the only driver in IndyCar that has his own merch tent. And not to mention, Padle Ward is more popular than them on Instagram, that being IndyCar. He's more popular than Joseph Newgarden, who, of course, is a two-time champion. He's more popular than pretty much everybody in the IndyCar paddock. So for Mark Miles to just sit there and act like that he's bigger than him is really irritating. And then he basically went on to try to correct himself on Sunday or Saturday by saying that we're still once again negotiating to go to an international race. Mark, you guys just need to actually do something to grow your sport. I get you had a solid crowd for once, but you guys need to grow your sport. If you bring the action to people and listen to what the fans want and the drivers want, I think you're going to have a lot of happy campers. It wasn't just Pato that called out the Penske group. You had Scott Dixon call them out. Will Power called them out. He said that IndyCar should be racing there instead of NASCAR, which I completely disagree. NASCAR should be racing there over IndyCar, in my opinion. But for IndyCar to grow, you've got to start doing certain things, and you can't just sit there and let NASCAR get ahead of them on this. This is on them for not doing what they need to do, and all they can do is blame themselves. And I get Pato being upset and frustrated with Mark Miles' comments, and I get why a lot of drivers probably did not take kindly to what they said. They're not happy about the charter stuff going on, which we're going to talk about on the NASCAR side here in just a short little bit. But I do get it, man. It's frustrating. Mark Miles, that was ridiculous comment in my opinion. That was unprofessional, and you should know better than that. There are things you just don't say in the media, and that's one thing you probably just need to keep your mouth shut on and not say. In my opinion, I think it was a little overkill what Mark Miles said, in my honest opinion. And now we're going ahead, jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Martin Truex Jr. Now, Martin Truex Jr. was being interviewed by the media this past weekend before the Southern 500 took place, and Martin Truex Jr. has pretty much confirmed his first race that he will officially be running in 2025. He says he plans to run the NASCAR Xfinity Series race at Rockingham Speedway next year. He says he's very excited about Rockingham coming back on the NASCAR schedule in 2025 and wants to go out there and win at the racetrack. So this is one of the races that Martin Truex Jr. has confirmed. We are also expecting that Martin Truex Jr. is going to run a few select other NASCAR Xfinity Series races in 2025 as well, and also will likely run the Daytona 500 with 2311 Racing. He'll likely be teammates potentially with Riley Herbst, Bubba Wallace, and Tyler Reddick, maybe Carlos Kurt Busch, they ever want to come out of retirement. But Martin Truex Jr. is going to get a chance and opportunity to race at Rockingham, a legendary racetrack. We know that Kyle Larson was also asked about if he was going to run at Rockingham. He said because it's on Easter, he says while he loves racing as much, he loves racing. He says he's not planning to take off Easter, which I think is good for a lot of people in Xfinity because we know Kyle Larson has been pretty good at Rockingham. He did win the truck race there in 2013. But nonetheless, I think Martin Truex Jr. is going to be very competitive in that race. He's always good at these types of tracks. I know Truex had a bad slump in recent weeks, in recent months in the Cup Series, but I think going to Xfinity and competing there, I think is going to have a really strong chance and an opportunity to be very, very competitive in the NASCAR Xfinity Series at that event. He'll be looking to win his first Xfinity race in a long time. I think the last time he won Xfinity was back in 2006 or 2007, I'm pretty sure. So Martin Truex Jr. will be looking to go out there and win at Rockingham. I think he'll have a really great chance and a strong opportunity to, for sure, win at Rockingham, in my honest opinion. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Mexico City once again. Now, obviously, I kind of talk about this with the IndyCar story, but we do know going into 2025, one of the biggest and best changes that we have seen on the NASCAR Cup schedule for 2025 is that the NASCAR Cup Series will officially race in Mexico City at the Autodromo Hernando Rodriguez track in 2025. This will be the first time that the NASCAR Cup Series has raced the track in history. First time the Cup Series raced internationally since 1958 when they raced in Toronto. And this also be the first time that the Xfinity Series has raced there since 2008. And Dale Suarez was asked a lot of questions about this, and he says he's been getting lined up by a lot of people in the industry, and he says that a lot of people from Mexico are very, very happy about this, and they're glad to see this. And Daniel Suarez was not the only driver that was very, very happy about this. Denny Hamlin was extremely happy and very proud that NASCAR is going to Mexico City next year. And Alex Bowman was kind of joking around, and he says that he pretty much will need a new passport because he's never been outside of the country before. So he says he's going to need a passport when he does leave the country. But he's also very excited. Chase Elliott this past week as well also said he was very excited about this as well. This is really, really huge for the sport that NASCAR is racing outside of the country for the first time on the Cup Series side, because I genuinely think that it's a huge deal. This is going to be one of the most popular races, in my opinion, next year. And I think it is not only going to be one of the most popular races on TV, but I think it's also going to be one of the more popular races that we've seen people go out and watch. And I think attendance is going to be huge. You're probably going to have over 100,000 people show up to this race, which again, I think is massive and very, very huge for the sport. You need the sport to grow in a big way, and having more and more people show up to your events and come out and watch, I think is really, really huge for the sport itself. And I think going to Mexico City, I think it's going to be a very fun event as a whole. So I'm so excited about this. I'm really looking forward to this. And I'm very happy and glad to see that NASCAR is going to Mexico City next year. I think the racing is going to be fun. I know the next gen car has had its own issues on tracks like road courses, but at the same time, I am very happy to see that NASCAR will be racing in Mexico City in 2025. It's a huge deal. Maybe get some drivers out of retirement to come out there. But you got to look at a guy like SVG also, and you get to see Chase Elliott, Kyle Larson, Bubba Wallace, Ross Chastain, you name it. All those guys get the chance and opportunity to compete in Mexico City in 2025, which I think is very massive and huge for the sport, in my honest opinion. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Joey Logano. Now, basically, there's been a lot of talk and conversation in recent weeks surrounding the flips that have been taking place. Now, luckily at Darlington, there wasn't a flip for the Southern 500. But the last two prior races at Daytona and, of course, in Michigan, we saw multiple blowovers. In the Xfinity race, we saw Kyle Sieg go upside down, but he had a little bit of help. Corey LaJoie got side-by-side with Noah Gragson, got sideways coming off the corner, and pretty much wrecked himself and flipped and did a blowover down the back straightaway. And then they added a shark fin to the car. And then you did have the other two flips where Michael Medell had a near flip during the Daytona race. And we basically saw Josh Berry flip many times upside down and pretty much do a barrel roll and stuck it upside down. Now, Joey Logano was asked a question about this by the media, and he pretty much says that one thing that NASCAR could end up doing is maybe removing some underbody components that would help keep the cars stay grounded. Now, Joey Logano is not entirely wrong. Now, obviously, there is a law of physics where if you have a lot of air under these cars, there is a very strong chance and great opportunity that a car, regardless, is still going to end up flipping. But at the same token, same time, one thing that these cars should not be doing as much as they are is flipping like this. They added those shark fins, and they really did not end up working. So NASCAR does have a lot of work to be done. I think the biggest thing is that this car is like a turtle shell. Under the car, you have an underbody, and basically it's very, very flat on that underbody. If you got rid of some of those underbody components on the car at super speedways especially, and I don't think getting rid of the speeds or slowing it down is going to fix this problem, there needs to be a way for these cars to not be able to flip as much. And if NASCAR can find a way to do something about that, and maybe adding a spoiler, I don't know at this point, maybe making that spoiler bigger, which I think would reduce speed just a little bit, but I don't think reducing the speed is going to be the thing that fixes a lot of these problems. I think there's other areas in NASCAR needs to look at for sure, and I really hope they're looking at some of these areas to try to fix the problems. To me, I think there's definitely a lot of work that still needs to be done on the next-gen car, and I really hope the NASCAR is looking at some solutions and trying to find more of a problem in this situation, not trying to find a solution to the problems of these cars flipping. I do agree with Joe Logano, though. We should remove underbody components of the car, because I think it would also help make the racing a little bit better, in my honest opinion. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Sheldon Creed. Now, Sheldon Creed, of course, came up very, very short to winning the NASCAR Xfinity Series race at Darlington once again. After leading the race with 5 or 6 laps to go in the event, Sheldon Creed caught a very bad break. AJ Allmendinger unfortunately had a flat tire and hit the outside wall very, very hard, and that would bring the caution out. Coming down pit road at the end of the race, Sheldon Creed had the lead coming in, but unfortunately his pit crew screwed up a little bit on the right rear and he fell back to third position. He got beat by Cole Custer and Christopher off pit road. And he tried everything to get back by those guys, but couldn't get it done and ended up finishing third. Another race where Sheldon should have run and didn't get it done. Now, Sheldon Creed was being interviewed by the media after the race, and he says that he didn't make any money in 2024 at Joe Gibbs Racing. Not a lot of people are asking, why did he not make a lot of money? Well, one of the big things when it comes to the Xfinity Series and the Truck Series especially is a lot of these drivers, no disrespect, a lot of these drivers, if they've got sponsorship, they go out there and pay for these rides. Sheldon Creed is not the only driver that's paying for his ride currently at the moment. I believe Sam Mayer is paying for his ride, so he's not really making any money. You, of course, got Chandler Smith, who's bringing sponsorship and funding with him. And a lot of the funding for Chandler Smith has unfortunately dried up, which is why he's likely going to be out of Joe Gibbs Racing at the end of the year. Brandon Jones is another guy who's bringing sponsorship, and he's not basically paying for it. He's not getting paid for it because he is bringing sponsorship to the table, but he's not going to receive a paycheck, really. These guys have a lot of money back in them right now, and they're able to use it. But at the same token, same time, the caveat to that is they're not able to get any money from some of these teams, which I think for some of them, it is definitely frustrating, right? Because they probably want to be able to make some money. But at the same token, same time, sometimes you have to do certain things that you don't want to be able to make a little bit of money. Now, Sheldon Creed, we know next year is going to Haas Factory Team. And I just feel bad for Sheldon Creed in a sense, too, that you put all this effort into it. It looks like you're easily going to go out there and win a race. And unfortunately, you get caught up in a very, very bad break and you don't get it done. It sucks. I mean, you think about other drivers like Haley Dean, who she was probably bringing a little bit of funding as well to her team. And now she's not getting paid at this point because she's not racing. But I think this is something that's going to continue happening all in motorsports. And again, I do feel bad for Sheldon Creed. He had done a lot of things right. It looked like he was going to go out there and win. And unfortunately, Sheldon Creed could not close out the deal because of a bad pit stop. It wasn't his fault, unfortunately, but it's interesting to hear a driver talk about the fact that they're not making any money currently at the moment racing in NASCAR at this particular point. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Padle Ward once again. Now, according to multiple different reports, Padle Ward is very interested in racing in NASCAR. The NASCAR NBC account had put out a tweet saying, would you like to see Padle Ward race in NASCAR on a one-off at a track like Mexico City? Which I saw a lot of people basically saying, yes, we want to see Padle Ward race in NASCAR. Now, the issue is for Padle Ward is that he probably would not race in 2025 at Mexico City, and here's why. There is an IndyCar race that is taking place at Gateway on June 14th to 15th, which is, by the way, the big reason why the NASCAR Cup race from Gateway is moving from the middle of June to the second race of the round of 16 next year. That's why Gateway has moved into the playoffs for 2025 because of this. So unless they wanted to kind of do what they tried to do with the double where they had paddle racing there, but of course we don't know what time the race is going to be starting in Mexico, and it's going to take a long time for paddle to fly from St. Louis all the way down to Mexico City. Now that being said, in 2026, if the IndyCar schedules can kind of line and find a way for them to race down there, I could definitely see Padle Ward coming out and racing in NASCAR. And honestly, I want to see him race in NASCAR. I genuinely do think that Padle Ward would be super, super competitive. I think he would have the pace and speed to contend. And I think he would do a very solid and a really, really great job. And I want to see the guy get the chance and opportunity to race in NASCAR in the future. I think if we know that Project 91 is coming back next year, we don't know any drivers who get behind the wheel. I do expect that Connor Zillage will probably make his NASCAR Cup Series debut in that car more than likely next year. Maybe some other drivers like Juan Montoya comes out of retirement potentially. We don't know at this moment in time, but I think it would be pretty excellent to see a driver like Padle Ward come over and race in NASCAR and not only be pretty solid, but I think also be very, very quick as well. So I hope it does end up happening for sure, and I really hope we do get to see the chance and opportunity for a driver like Padle Ward get a chance to race in NASCAR. I hope it ends up happening, and I really hope we do get to see him have a chance and opportunity to race in NASCAR in the near future, maybe in 2024. Maybe 2026 potentially. Maybe if it could happen in 2025, you never know if things could align. But I really hope Padle Ward does in fact get the chance and a strong opportunity to race in NASCAR in the not-so-distant future, because I think it'd be really cool to see him drive a Project 91 entry, maybe in 2026, at Mexico City. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Shane Van Gisbergen. As it was originally reported by SkiCafe.com, but also reported by Adam Stern as well, that Shane Van Gisbergen is already plotting his Chili Bowl debut with Trackhouse Racing in 2025. We know it was announced about a couple weeks ago at Daytona that Shane Van Gisbergen is going to be running full-time in the NASCAR Cup Series next year, driving the number 88 car for Trackhouse Racing. So what are they doing? They're going to throw him in a deep end and put him in a midget. Now, to be fair to Shane Van Gisbergen, he does have a lot of dirt racing experience. They have a lot of dirt tracks out in Australia. And while he did compete in basically the cars he competed in, basically where he won 3 supercar championships, he also ran some midget races and also races in Winged Outlaws, and I believe was pretty competitive out there in the Outlaws out there. And I think Shane Van Gisbergen would be able to get up to speed very, very quickly, especially if he isn't in a very competitive ride. We know Trackhouse has also worked with teams in the past. I believe they worked with Carson Oates, if I remember correctly, when he ran the Chili Bowl. And the Chili Bowl is one of the biggest events out there. If Kyle Larson's racing the event, he'll be going up against him. But we probably are going to see other Cup drivers go out there during the offseason and race. And getting those reputations behind the wheel, getting the opportunity to race, I think is going to be very, very fun for Shane. And we've seen Shane, at least on the NASCAR side, continue to get better. He continues to show very impressive performances. He continues to go out there and contend a lot more. He just got a top 10 in the NASCAR Xfinity Series race at Darlington. He did finish 26th in the Southern 500, but at least he was able to complete the race and completed as many laps as possible. He's been getting better as the year has progressed and gone on this year. And overall, I have been very impressed to see the progression of Shane, not just on the ovals, but the road courses as well. He's won 3 road course races, probably going to win a couple before the end of the year, and honestly, could get a second Cup win, as I do think he's going to be very competitive at Watkins Glen later this year. So I'm so excited about this for Shane. I think he is going to be super competitive. I think it's going to be a really quick opportunity for him. And again, I really hope he can go out there and have a chance to win the Chili Bowl. It's going to be tough because there's a lot of great competition who will be running the Chili Bowl. Tanner Thorson's probably coming back next year. They're opening up the entry list here in the next couple months, and I really hope he does get a chance to run the Chili Bowl. So I do think he'll be very, very competitive when he does run the Chili Bowl. And just saying, I might have a Chili Bowl Nationals entry list video if SVG does run, so keep an eye on that. So we'll have to wait and see what happens, but it sounds like he's very interested in running the Chili Bowl Nationals potentially in 2025. I really hope he does end up having the chance to do it in 2025. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Kyle Busch and Parker Retzlaff. Now, if you've been paying attention over the last week or so, you have seen a lot of stuff going on between Kyle Busch and Parker Retzlaff. So Chevrolet got very, very upset and frustrated at Parker Retzlaff for not pushing Kyle Busch to victory lane at Daytona. And we've all been kind of wondering, what was Kyle Busch's response going to be to Parker Retzlaff in this situation? Well, Kyle Busch basically says that Parker Retzlaff does not owe him an apology. Now, why do he say he doesn't owe him an apology? Well, according to what Kyle Busch has said, Parker Retzlaff was not part of the Chevy key partner meeting. So that's why he doesn't have to apologize. So you're telling me, Chevrolet and RCR, you're telling me that you guys are mad at Parker Retzlaff, but Parker wasn't part of the Chevy meeting. So why are you mad at Parker Retzlaff, Chevrolet? Parker did nothing wrong. If he's not part of that key partner meeting, if Beer Motorsports, which isn't a key partner team, yes, RCR does build the car, that doesn't give the excuse to go out and yell at a young driver only in his second career start at the time. Not to mention a driver looking for his first win and trying to help Beer Motorsports secure a ton of money. Kyle Busch also had 25 other races to make the playoffs. And granted, RCR has shown a lot more speed in recent weeks. Kyle Busch had a 4th place finish in Michigan and back-to-back runner-up finishes, and I think Kyle Busch could win before the end of the year. But to go out there and blame Parker Retzlaff when, like I've already just said a second ago, he wasn't even part of the major meetings that they have, I just think that's inexcusable on Chevrolet's part. They know a lot better. They knew a lot better of what they're doing, and it's just inexcusable to act like a bunch of babies. It's just ridiculous from Chevrolet's end, in all honesty. They knew better. They know how to act a lot better than this, and this is not the first time we've seen Chevrolet go overkill. I remember 2019 when they were basically telling their drivers to talk about the new Corvette that was coming out back 5 years ago. It's just inexcusable at this point. Again, if it was Chase Elliott, if it was Kyle Larson, that would be a different story. But again, Parker Retzlaff is a guy trying to get everything he can for sponsors, and I can't blame the guy. He's trying to be a competitive driver in this sport, and it just kind of feels like that Chevrolet was overstepping their boundaries in this situation, which is nothing new with Chevrolet. They've done it before many, many times, and they've been frustrated with a lot of things many, many times in the past. So I'm not shocked, and I'm not surprised to see Chevrolet overstep their boundaries, in my opinion. They went overkill, and I do think they clearly went a little bit over the line when it comes to the things they were saying, and I don't blame them, Kyle Busch, for defending Parker. Kyle's a good guy. He's been such a class act in recent months, and I don't blame Kyle Busch for defending Parker in this situation because, in all honesty, in all seriousness, Chevrolet went a little bit overkill, same with RCR, in my honest opinion, going after Parker Retzlaff, in my honest opinion. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about charter negotiations once again. We got multiple stories surrounding this. So right before the green flag drop for the Southern 500, Bob Pockrass and Jordan Bianchi both put out tweets in regards to the charter negotiations. And basically the first update was that apparently the teams were offered another charter offer. And Curtis Polk had a very interesting way of demonstrating how he felt. Basically, Curtis Polk said, "Please do not ask about my charter. NASCAR might get rid of it," telling me that NASCAR is probably not happy with the way things are going. Then about 20 minutes into the Southern 500, Adam Stern basically tweeted that they actually are beginning to film for the second season of NASCAR's Netflix series, the Speed series that they're having, but they said that teams said they could basically revoke it if NASCAR does not agree on a charter agreement very, very soon, meaning we may have a lot less teams that are getting involved with the NASCAR speed documentary that is coming out, full speed documentary. This is absolutely huge. Obviously, we know there are some teams that are very frustrated. We have heard that the teams have agreed to a revenue split at this particular moment and point, it seems like. But it seems like every time we get a charter offer, it seems like we're going backwards. We are now in September of 2024. Keep this in mind. Charters have to be done by the Daytona 500 next year. Otherwise, if charter negotiation is not done for next year, this could get really, really messy very, very quickly. And it is concerning to see that the charter stuff is not done at this point. Obviously, the teams, they want permanent charters. They want more money, which again, they're expected to get more money from NASCAR. NASCAR has made that very, very clear that they will be giving the teams a lot more money going forward, which I think is going to help the teams in a massive and a major way, regardless of how much money they do end up giving them. But at the same token, same time, you've also got to understand from the team's perspective and NASCAR's perspective. The teams, they want leverage in the sport. And NASCAR, including Jim France especially, they're not planning to give leverage. NASCAR has ruled with an iron fist for 76 years at this point. So are we headed toward a split? A lot of people are going to be asking me that. No, I don't think we're headed toward a split. Could we be headed toward a lockout? Maybe that if things don't get turned around quickly with this, I could see a lockout coming in, and that would be really, really bad. Now, obviously, I think you'll have some teams that will be able to agree with this very, very soon. Because I think that you can't, and people have been saying just go to a split. Yeah, that really worked out very well for IndyCar, didn't it? IndyCar and open wheel racing is still recovering on the IndyCar side right now at this moment from issues like this. So both sides need to come to an agreement. You need one to come to one side, and need the other side to come to the other as well. I really hope for the team's sake and NASCAR's sake, they can come to an agreement very, very soon. Because sooner that the teams and NASCAR can come to an agreement, I think the better it is going to be for everybody. So I hope for everybody's sake that they do come to an agreement on this charter agreement soon so we can see teams be able to compete once again next year. I think it is eventually going to happen, but we're getting in later stages and it's starting to become more of a red flag situation when it comes to the charter agreement, in my honest opinion. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Richard Childress. Now, we already know that Rich Childress Racing lost their appeal after what happened at Richmond. So at the end of the Richmond race, we saw Austin Dillon pretty much jump Joey Logano and Denny Hamlin going into turn number 3 and turn number 4. And NASCAR basically told them that we're going to give you the win still, but that win will not count toward playoff eligibility. Now, obviously, they tried to appeal multiple different times, and unfortunately, this past week, they lost the final appeal when they went to Bill Mullis. Now, Richard Childress was being interviewed by the media earlier this weekend, and Richard Childress basically was very upset about losing that appeal. He basically says that what happened at this, what they decided to do here, will change NASCAR forever. Basically said that it changed the fundamentals of the sport. Says NASCAR draw the line a little bit, but he also said that this will change how people race. He said people will not be able to make contact going forward, and drivers will not be able to race going forward. To that, Richard, I completely disagree. Look, you literally were on the radio telling Austin Dillon, Papa is proud, after he dumped Joey Logano in turn number 3 at Richmond and right-rear Denny Hamlin down the straightaway, which, by the way, for that, he probably should have been suspended in all honesty and all seriousness. Not to mention the radio communication clearly showed that you guys were encouraging him to go and wreck him. Brendan Benesh got suspended for 3 races originally, then he got down to 1 race because they felt like a 1-race suspension was fair, which I don't completely disagree. I think 3 might have been a little bit too much for that. But at the same token, you were literally saying that NASCAR doesn't want championships decided like that, especially with the win in your own system. It has been getting worse and worse with the driving etiquette, and NASCAR had to step in and draw the line somewhere. Richard, your driver, Dale Earnhardt, did it multiple times and racked people for the win. So I guess you think that they're going to change it. NASCAR does not have a problem with close contact, beating and banging racing. They've never really had an issue with that. This isn't like Formula 1 where Formula 1 gets mad at you for a little bit of contact. They don't get mad at you for a little bit of contact in NASCAR. That's racing. But just going in a corner and completely dumping somebody and then right-rearing them down the straightaway, that is a completely different thing, Richard, and you know that. You know that. If you were in the same position, at a different position, and Logano or Hamilton had done that, and you guys were leading the race, you'd be crying for those drivers to get suspended for multiple different races. But Richard, you're a hypocrite. I feel like Rich Childress Racing and RCR in general, in the recent years, they have really become the laughing stock of the sport with some of the decisions and the things they say. You look at what happened last year at Martinsville. Sheldon Creed does nothing wrong, and Richard Childress gets upset with him. Andy Petrie at least apologized to Sheldon Creed, and kudos to him for apologizing for getting mad at Sheldon for basically no reason whatsoever. But the way Austin Hill handled that was childish, and Richard was really just disrespectful there. You think about other incidents, what happened here at Richmond, and then the hypocrisy there. Last year, Richard literally called for Austin Cindric to be suspended after basically unintentionally wrecking Austin Dillon in a gateway. So the hypocrisy is so unreal with RCR. At this point, if there's sometimes where someone just needs to be quiet in situations, and Richard's one of those guys. And Richard's almost 80 years old. You don't see Rick Hendrick at 80 doing stuff like this. You don't see Joe Gibbs doing stuff like this, where they're going to the media and saying dumb things like this. It's just, Richard knows better than this. It's frustrating to see someone who's had a great career as an owner, but let's be real, hasn't won a championship in 30 years. It's been 30 years since they last won a championship. And it's just so frustrating to see this team just continue to put on clown behavior like this. And Richard defending this stuff, man, is just inexcusable. It's just uncalled for. Denny Hamlin kind of got hurt, by the way, after that. Just saying, Richard. So imagine if it was harder hits. Just inexcusable from Austin, in my opinion. And I think NASCAR did get the right call in this situation, in my honest opinion. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the first of two major stories in today's episode as we're talking about Harrison Burton. Now, Harrison Burton is one of the biggest question marks in regards to silly season for 2025. Harrison Burton, we know, will not be returning to the Wood Brothers going into the 2025 season and is currently looking for a ride going into next year. Now, he was asked by Bob Pockers about this over the weekend, does he think that this win from this past weekend in Daytona and making the playoffs based off the win at Daytona, does he think that it will help him get a chance and an opportunity to find a ride going into 2025? He said he really doesn't know at this point if it's going to help him win. He said it might help just a little bit, but he's not sure if it's going to help him in win. Now, where could Harrison Burton go in 2025? The one thing that does help Harrison, right, is he does bring a little bit of sponsorship and funding to the table. So it is going to help Harrison Burton a little bit that he does have some funding and sponsorship with him. So at this point, where could he end up going? He could still find a way to be in the Cup Series. There is a front row car available for 2025, but despite the rumors of maybe Ford not wanting to work with Zane Smith, there's still conversation that Zane Smith or Chandler Smith is likely going to end up in that front row seat, because I don't think sponsorship is going to be as big of an importance over there as it is for other organizations. So I don't think he goes to front row. Could he go to Rick or Racing Press? That could be an option for next year. Rick Ware would be a solid team to go with, in my opinion. They've been showing a lot of improvement, especially with rumors that Justin Healy could potentially be moving back over to Spire Motorsports for 2025. I'd have to imagine that he could be a candidate there because of sponsorship. But Ryan Prix is also heavily linked over there, and there's rumors that we could see RFK get a third charter from Rick Ware and have a charter lease out to them for next year. Another team he could go to is Kaulig Racing. We have, according to Chris Rice, apparently he has had conversations at Harrison Burton about racing for their Cup Series program for 2025. We know he won't be racing for their Xfinity program, as their program is pretty much set at this point for 2025. We'll get to that driver here in just a little bit. But I think Kaulig could be a good option to go to. They're a team that has struggled, but again, I think they're looking for people who bring sponsorship and funding to the table, and Harrison Burton clearly has that. He's got sponsorship funding from Dex Imaging, so that could be an option for him. Another option for Harrison Burton is going all the way back down to the Truck Series and driving for Tricon Garage. Tricon Garage is expected to have multiple rides open up for the 2025 season. There's a room, we know at this point that Taylor Gray is most likely moving up to the NASCAR Xfinity Series. William Swalch and Brandon Jones are expected to be teammates for the team. in 2025. So I could definitely see him going back down to trucks. Now, to be fair to Harrison, or kind of unfortunate for Harrison, is that he did not win in the truck series. He won, of course, in the NASCAR Xfinity series a lot of times, but he didn't really end up winning in the NASCAR truck series. So I'm not sure if Tricom would be the best option. But the ride that I think a lot of people have been saying is the most likely ride for Harrison going into 2025 is AM Racing. I have heard AM Racing mentioned as a potential major possibility of him going there in 2025. AM Racing, obviously, we don't know what their future looks like for next year at this time. Obviously, we know Hailie Deegan's not going back there in 2025. We don't even know if she's going to be part of NASCAR next year, potentially. But they have struggled this year, even since Hailie Deegan left. Joey Logano's the only driver that's gotten the top 10 for the organization and team. They've been all over the place. They fired their crew chief recently. But I think bringing in a driver like Harrison Burton, who does have a little bit of sponsorship and does have a little bit of funding with him, I don't think that would be a horrendous move from AM Racing. Would he be my first choice to get behind the wheel? Probably not, because I think that there's a driver like Brett Moffitt out there who could be a really great driver that they could absolutely end up using. But Harrison would be a solid driver to go with. I think he would absolutely do a lot better in the NASCAR Xfinity Series than he's done in Cup. And I think rebuilding up his career and performance, I think he could do that. Now, what would be my expectations for Harrison if he goes over to AM Racing? I think realistically, he would do better than Hailie Deegan. That's factual at this point, but I don't think he's going to set the world on fire. Now, a team that he could go to is Penske if they open up a program there, but I don't know if that's going to happen either. At this point for Harrison, I hope he does find a ride for 2025. I think he deserves an opportunity and chance once again, and he's still only 24 years old. He's still relatively young, and he's got plenty of time to get better as a race car driver. So I really hope for Harrison that he can find a ride for 2025, and he can hope and get a second chance in NASCAR Cup racing in the future, and maybe that could lead to him maybe having a Cup ride, maybe in the not-so-distant future if he can perform in the Xfinity Series many times down the road. We'll see what ends up happening. We'll see where Harrison Burton truly ends up going in 2025. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the final major story of today's episode as we're talking about Christian Eckes. Now, we talked about this on the channel earlier this weekend, but it was finally officially confirmed after speculation for the last few months that Christian Eckes will officially move up to the NASCAR Xfinity Series in 2025, joining Kaulig Racing in the 2025 season. He will replace AJ Allmendinger in the number 16. And according to Chris Rice, this is a multi-year deal. Now, one big question that's been asked is, with this announcement of him going to Kaulig Racing, will he get the opportunity and chance to run some Cup races in 2025? He said no. Christian Eckes will only be focused on racing the Xfinity Series next year and will be learning experience in that series in 2025. Now, Chris Rice was also asked by the media if we could see Christian Eckes potentially run some races at the end of the year in a fourth car for the organization. Chris Rice also confirmed that he will not make any Xfinity Series starts in 2025, and he wants him to, as he wants him to put his full focus on trying to win a Truck Series championship this year, which I can't really blame him, right? Christian Eckes has a really good chance to win the championship in the Truck Series this year. Let's talk about this move of Christian Eckes moving up to Kaulig. I think this is a very, very good move from Kaulig Racing, in my opinion. Christian Eckes has performed exceptionally well in the Truck Series this year. He's been one of the guys that's been able to keep up with Corey Heim the majority of this year. He, of course, won the regular season championship. He's very likely going to end up making it to the championship for this year. And with how fast he's been at Phoenix in the past, I think that he is going to be a major threat to win a lot of races next year in Xfinity. And he's replacing a really good driver in AJ Allmendinger, because we know AJ is moving back up to the NASCAR Cup Series in 2025. So I do expect that Christian Eckes is going to have some growing pains at the start of the year next year, but realistically, I think he is going to have a very strong year. He's one of the best young prospects. I put him number 3 behind Corey Heim, who I think could end up in Cup in the future, and Connor Zilisch, who's number 2, who's the racing prodigy, who's been winning a lot of races in ARCA. He's going to be racing some Xfinity races here. In fact, he's making his Xfinity Series debut next week at Watkins Glen, which is going to be very, very exciting. I think he's going to make a run at SVG in that event. And then, of course, he is going to be going full-time with JRM in Xfinity next year. But Christian is number 3. And I think Christian, despite the fact that it is Kaulig Racing, an organization that has struggled just a little bit in recent years, I think Christian will have a very strong year. He's been able to get the best out of equipment in the Truck Series. He's been the best performing driver in McAnally, while his teammates like Tyler Ankerman have been good, even though Anker may not be back at this team next year. McAnally, Hilgeman, and Dale Dye's been good. Christian has been on a whole different level. He's been on a different league, in my opinion. He's been so impressive, and I think he's earned the right and opportunity to get this promotion. He almost went to Kaulig Racing for 2024. He almost ran in Xfinity this year, but he wanted one more year in trucks, which I can't blame him. So what are my realistic expectations for Christian Eckes next year? Realistically, I think Christian Eckes will be an underdog for the championship. I think he will win a couple races next year, and I think he will be the best driver at Kaulig in 2025. This is no disrespect to Josh Williams or Daniel Dye. They're both good drivers in my opinion, but Christian Eckes is an all-around better race car driver than Daniel Dye and Josh Williams, and I think they both know it respectfully. They're both good drivers, but I think Williams has completely struggled, and Daniel Dye, while he's shown a lot of improvement in the NASCAR Truck Series, and to be fair, he's had a couple good runs in Xfinity, he just generally, I don't think is going to set the world on fire next year. So realistically, I think Eckes gets at least 2 to 3 wins potentially next year, though the field is going to be very competitive. You're going to have Connor Zilisch next year moving up. Of course, you're going to have Justin Allgaier. You're going to have Sammy Smith to deal with. You're going to have Brandon Jones to deal with. You're going to have William Sawalich to deal with. You're going to have Sheldon Creed and Sam Mayer at the Haas factory team next year. You're probably going to have Chandler Smith most likely again next year to deal with. You're going to have and Eric Almirola too if he decides to come back. So I think you're going to have a very competitive field. But if there's anybody that can really set the world on fire and do really good in equipment, it is definitely a driver like Christian Eckes. So I'm very happy for Christian. I think this is a fantastic career move and career choice for him. And I do expect that Christian, like I've already mentioned and said, I think he's going to be super competitive and super good with Kaulig Racing next year. I'm really excited for Christian, and I think he'll do a really good job at Kaulig Racing next year. Congratulations on a great opportunity for Christian. I think in the next couple of years he'll be racing full-time in Cup, and I think he'll continue to improve in the Cup Series. Once he does go Cup racing, maybe with Kaulig or RCR in the future, I think he'll be very competitive for sure, in my honest opinion. So congrats to him on moving up in 2025. So, that is going to today's NASCAR news and motorsports news video. I want to thank you guys for watching. Please subscribe to the channel, notifications on, so if I win a video, it does go live on my channel. Follow me on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, and support my Patreon as well. Links description below that, and comment your thoughts below on today's episode. How do you think Christian Eckes is going to do? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And where do you think Harrison Burton ends up in 2025? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. There should be more videos maybe dropping later today, but probably not. Tomorrow you're going to see playoff predictions for 2025 for the NASCAR Cup Series. Then on Wednesday, we're going to have a NASCAR news video most likely, and also the Xfinity predictions for Atlanta. And then on Thursday, we'll have Cup race picks for Atlanta as well, and probably the paint skin video potentially as well. Got a lot of great content dropping that I cannot wait for you guys to check out. So anyways, like I said, I want to thank you guys for watching today's episode, and I'll see you guys next time for more great, awesome NASCAR content, and other motorsports content on the channel like this. Take care, everybody.